Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, May 1st. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 573 of the genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll be joined by our contributor Ruwaida Amer, a writer and video journalist and the Gaza producer for the recently released feature documentary, The Encampments, an intimate portrait of the global student movement ignited at Columbia University in the spring of 2024 to protest their institution's complicity in Israel's genocide. We'll also be joined by Kei Pritsker, who co-directed The Encampments, to talk about how it casts light on Israel lobby fabrications about campus anti-Semitism that are the pretext for the ongoing government crackdown on free speech. Later on in the program, Jon will cover the latest resistance news from Gaza and the loss of a U.S. fighter jet off of an aircraft carrier while evading Yemeni fire in the Red Sea. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. It has been 60 days of a complete siege on the Gaza Strip, beginning on March 2nd, when Israel closed the crossings and blocked the entry of food, fuel, medicine, medical equipment, and other basic essentials. Bombings and airstrikes have continued nonstop, killing dozens of Palestinians every day. Since Israel broke the so-called ceasefire and resumed its relentless massacres on March 18th, more than 2,300 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 6,000 have been injured, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza. The official death toll since October 2023 is 52,000, the ministry reports, with thousands more still buried and unaccounted for under the rubble. Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud reported that on Wednesday, April 30th, massive explosions rocked the central and northern parts of the Gaza Strip. In Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, 3 separate overnight attacks hit residential buildings with people inside. Quote, "Those who survived the attack described it as an earthquake that shattered the entire building," Mahmoud said. In one building, 8 were killed in a single attack. Emergency workers are still looking for more. The number of people killed is expected to rise as more family members are still looking for their loved ones. Israeli attacks have intensified across northern Gaza and in Al-Mawasi and other areas southwest of Khan Yunis, where displaced Palestinian families have sheltered in makeshift encampments and buildings. This video is from Khan Yunis on Tuesday. The United Nations Human Rights Office stated that between March 18th and April 27th, there were 259 Israeli attacks on residential buildings and 99 on the tents of displaced people. Quote, "Most of the attacks resulted in fatalities, including of women and children," the UN said, and among the strikes on tents, 40 reportedly took place in Al-Mawasi, in Khan Yunis, where the Israeli army repeatedly directed civilians to seek refuge. On Monday, April 28th, an Israeli drone attack killed 9 people, including 5 children in Gaza City. Dr. Munir al-Bursh, the director of the health ministry in Gaza, said that a pregnant woman was shot in the head by an Israeli drone that same day. He stated that medical teams at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City were able to deliver the baby via C-section, but the mother remained in critical condition. Last Thursday, April 24th, Palestinian journalists captured a video of a small child, later identified as 6-year-old Ali Faraj, who survived the bombing of his family's home in Gaza City. Due to the high impact of the bomb, Ali was thrown onto a neighboring roof, as was his father and one of his little sisters. Ali called out for help beside the dead bodies of his father and sister. His 5-year-old sister, who was wearing a pink dress, was torn in half. The The Anadolu news agency reported that Ali's mother, Nuha, was frantically searching for him beneath the rubble of their destroyed house and did not know that he had landed on the roof of the house next door. Her husband and their daughters, Zaina, Leen, Razan, Suad, and Juri, aged between 2 and 14 years old, were all killed in the attack. A reporter from the news agency visited Ali Faraj at the Kuwaiti hospital in Gaza, where he was receiving treatment for a severe abdominal injury. The boy said, quote, "The walls collapsed and I fell. I don't know what happened. I was with my dad. Then there was a huge explosion." Here's a video of an interview with Ali's mother Nuha. I'll summarize what she said afterwards.
نهى محمود شحته ام علي فرج. اللي صار انا كنت في المطبخ، صار انفجار، بعمل معكرونه للاولاد وقهوه لاخويا، وانا عمال بصب في القهوه لصار انفجار قوي كتير. وانا كنت واقفه وقعت، حسيت اشي ردم فوقي. قلت شهدت، انا فكرت حالي بدي اموت. بعدين رفعت الردم، بعدين رحت اشوف، ما لقيتش حيطان، ما لقيتش عفش، ما لقيتش حدا. نادي عليهم ما حدش برد. الحمد لله نزلت على الدرج، شفت ابني عليه، قلت له اشاور له، قال يما هيني وقال ما تخافش. كان في شباب طالعين على الدرج، قلت لهم ابني هي على السطح، روحوا جيبوه عايش. وانا عشان ظهري حرق رحت جبت الاسعاف ورحت، وابني اخذوه الشباب.
علي الوحيد اللي نجا؟
هو الوحيد من تقريبا 22 واحد، انا وياه طلعنا. كنا معظمهم اطفال الموجودين، اخوي اولاده، اختي اولادها، وجوزي واولادي، محمد ابن عم، كلهم راحوا.
That was Nuha 𝐄𝐥𝐿. She said that she was in the kitchen making coffee when there was an explosion. She got out from under pieces of rubble and went looking for her family members. There were no walls, no furniture, and no one. She said she saw Ali on the roof and cried for some men nearby to retrieve him. He was the only survivor, beside herself, of 22 people, mostly children, including her nieces and nephews. Quote, "My son Muhammad was playing. They're all gone," she said at the end. Palestinians in Gaza endured yet another week of Israel's engineered starvation policy and the total collapse of infrastructure, as more than 90% of people across the Strip remain forcibly displaced. Sandstorms blew in on Wednesday, compounding an already dire situation for displaced Palestinians. The World Food Programme stated on April 27th that all of its food stocks are depleted, forcing the closure of all of its supported bakeries and cutting off access to bread for 800,000 people. Quote, "Food parcels are fully exhausted, and the last remaining supplies have been delivered to hot meal kitchens, which are expected to run out within days," the WFP stated. The United Nations says that its partners, including the World Food Programme, quote, "have pre-positioned over 171,000 metric tons of food in the region, ready for delivery as soon as the restrictions on the entry of supplies imposed by the Israeli authorities since March 2nd are lifted. This amount is enough to sustain the entire population of about 2.1 million people for 3 to 4 months. People's coping strategies have been stretched to the limit, the UN adds. Widespread displacement has forced many people to abandon food supplies and emergency stocks secured during the ceasefire. Amjad Shawa, the director of the Palestinian Non-Governmental Organizations Network in Gaza, told Reuters news agency that of the 70 to 80 community kitchens still working in Gaza, in just a matter of days they could be forced to close. 15 have already closed earlier this week, he said. The Gaza Health Ministry said that at least 60,000 children are now showing symptoms of malnutrition. Juliette Touma, the spokesperson for the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, said this week that, quote, "The siege on Gaza is the silent killer of children, of older people. Families, whole families, 7 or 8 people, are resorting to sharing 1 can of beans or peas. she told journalists in Geneva. Imagine not having anything to feed your children. Children in Gaza are going to bed starving. In addition to the food, medicine, and water catastrophe, the fuel situation is rapidly deteriorating. The United Nations stated on Tuesday that with accessible benzene nearly depleted and diesel reserves critically low, remaining fuel is being prioritized for health, water, sanitation, and telecommunications services to sustain life-saving operations. Quote, humanitarian partners have made repeated attempts to retrieve fuel from areas that are currently inaccessible, either because they are under active displacement orders or located in so-called no-go zones that require humanitarians to coordinate with Israeli authorities, the UN Humanitarian Office stated. However, efforts to access these areas are routinely denied. The Gaza Civil Defense Corps warned on Monday, April 28th, that because of the lack of fuel, 8 out of their 12 rescue vehicles, including firefighting and ambulance trucks, are unable to operate. The Gaza municipality this week reported that they have been forced to dump waste in the middle of Gaza City because Israeli forces have prevented sanitation crews from reaching the main dump east of the city for 18 months. 260,000 tons of waste are accumulating in landfills and on city streets and are creating a health and environmental disaster, the municipality said. 10 Palestinian detainees were released from Israeli jails this week and returned to Gaza. Al Jazeera's Tarek Abu Azoum reported on April 29th that the detainees were in desperate physical and psychological condition. Quote, they have reported horrific ways of torture that they endured in the Israeli detention camps and centers, saying the condition of Palestinian detainees and prisoners is horrific and inhumane, calling for immediate protection for them and urging people to keep praying for them, Abu Azoum stated. Among the released detainees was Asad al-Nasasra, the sole survivor of the Israeli military ambush and attack on a group of paramedics and ambulance drivers in late March. As we reported, 14 rescue workers and 1 UN worker were summarily executed by Israeli soldiers, and their bodies were dumped into a mass pit. The ambulances were also buried. Al-Nasasra spent 37 days in Israeli detention and has yet to speak publicly about his experience witnessing and surviving the massacre. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight excerpts of Empty Markets and Desperate Parents by Shaima Eid, writing from Gaza. Shaima writes that, quote, Sheikh Radwan Market, west of Gaza City, looks like a ghost town. Broken stalls, shuttered shops, and sunken, hungry eyes dominate a place that was once teeming with life. Israel's latest ban on allowing food, water, fuel, electricity, and medicine into 2 million people into the Gaza Strip is nearly at its 2-month mark. And as famine rears its head again in Gaza, desperation is setting in. Markets are empty of food, medicines are scarce, and prices are rising. In a pharmacy near the market, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, 32 years old, was asking for a package of formula milk for his youngest child. I went to 3 pharmacies this morning and couldn't find any type of infant formula, 𝐓𝐡 told the Electronic Intifada. His search at Sheikh Radwan Market proved equally fruitless, and even if it hadn't, he said, prices have become exorbitant. He was left despairing about the impact on his children's health. On April 27th, the UN's World Food Program announced that it had run out of food in Gaza, 54 days after Israel imposed the total blockade. That blockade is now being challenged by the UN at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Israel remains unrepentant. Responding to the ICJ hearing, Israel's Foreign Minister, Gideon Sa'ar, described the UN's protest against its blockade as part of a, quote, systematic persecution. The UN has become a rotten anti-Israel and anti-Semitic body, Sa'ar declared on April 28th. In Gaza, there is little time for such genocidal grandstanding. Samar al-Tawil, a mother of 4, stood in front of an empty stall trying to secure rice at less than exorbitant prices. I can no longer tell my children that what they want is unavailable. They keep crying, and their father and I are powerless to find a solution, she said. Those are excerpts from Empty Markets and Desperate Parents by Shaima Eid, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces shot and killed a 16-year-old Palestinian boy in the northern occupied West Bank city on April 25th. According to Defense for Children International Palestine, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 was shot in the chest by Israeli soldiers while he was closing up the shop where he worked after Israeli forces began carrying out a military incursion into the town of Salem at about 3:30 in the afternoon. Ayed Abu-Aktesh, Accountability Program Director at DCIP, said, quote, Israeli forces are relentlessly targeting Palestinian children from Nablus to Jerusalem to Gaza without a moment of reprieve. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was clearly no threat to Israeli soldiers, and yet they fatally shot him anyway. And as usual, no one will be held accountable for killing a Palestinian child in cold blood. How many Palestinian children's bodies is enough for the world to enact sanctions on Israel and force accountability? Israeli forces have killed 24 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank in 2025, the children's rights group stated. Activist and journalist Bassel Adra filmed this video of Israeli bulldozers destroying homes and water wells in Masafer-Yatta, near Hebron in the southern West Bank. Local news sources say that these demolitions are part of a series of intensifying attacks by the Israeli army and their settler foot soldiers on the villages in Masafer-Yatta. Settlers have routinely vandalized and destroyed homes and farmland in the area and are working to expand illegal colonial outposts. Meanwhile, Israeli settlers set fire to Palestinian agricultural land and stabbed a Palestinian man in the town of Duma, near Nablus, on April 30th. The attack came as huge fires rapidly spread across the Jerusalem hills, reaching Israeli occupation forces bases and prompting Israel to request international assistance, Wafa news agency reported. In Jenin, Israeli forces raided and ransacked the family home of veteran journalist Ali Samoudi on April 29th at 5 a.m, then detained, interrogated, and arrested him. The Israeli army said that because of a deterioration in his health, Samoudi was being transferred to an Israeli hospital. Samoudi's family said that Israeli authorities had not told them the name of the hospital where he was being treated or any other details, but that he is expected to be brought before a military court next week. Samoudi, who has reported from Jenin for decades and contributed to local and international outlets, was working alongside Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh when she was assassinated by an Israeli sniper nearly 3 years ago. He was also shot in the shoulder during that attack on journalists. Finally, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Palestine. Musician and music teacher Ahmed Mouin regularly films himself and his students singing, playing music, and trying to alleviate the trauma through his project, Gaza Birds Singing. On Wednesday, he posted this video with the following caption: "A child's smile is stronger than war. Every time I see a child smile amidst the destruction, I forget all the pain I've lived. That small smile is my strength. It's the light that keeps me going no matter what." With my team Gaza Birds Singing, we chose to fight war with music, turning the cries of displacement into songs of love and peace. From inside the refugee camps, we plant joy on children's faces. We sing, we dance, we create real moments of happiness, even if just for a little while, Mouin said.
Hi everyone, today we have new students. We're going to build the new groups to teach them instruments and singing. We're going to show you. Love you.
was musician and music teacher Ahmed Mouin. That's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Thank you for another comprehensive report of so much difficult and unbearable news. But thank you for helping us to keep on top of it and not keep people in Gaza out of sight and out of mind. We need to keep them front and center always.
That's right. Yeah, that's our duty. Thank you, Ali. Yeah, there's so much. It's just bottomless. It's relentless. Honestly, like I don't know. I'm just kind of left in I feel like I have 1,000-yard stare all the time. It's so brutal. It's so brutal.
Yeah.
But we're gonna hear from one of our contributors, our dear contributors in Gaza. So why don't you introduce her?
Yeah, we're definitely going to keep the focus on Gaza right now. And just a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Amer, here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. Despite everything we've gone through in Gaza over the past year and a half, the situation has not been as hellish as it has been in these last difficult days. I've never had such terrifying daily experiences. Warplanes shaking my home, shooting from low-flying aircraft that sounds like it will hit our roof, non-stop artillery fire from tanks until now. Those words were written by Ruwaida Amer in an article published by the Electronic Intifada this week. For the past 3 weeks, the Israeli army has occupied the so-called Morag corridor in southern Gaza. It aims to cut off the entire southern city of Rafah, which lies mostly in ruins, from Khan Yunis and the rest of Gaza to the north. Just like the so-called Netzarim corridor, which Israel established south of Gaza City, the Morag corridor is named after an Israeli settlement that existed there for decades until Israel was forced to withdraw its colonists from the interior of Gaza in 2005. Ruwaida Amer has lived in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 neighborhood east of Khan Yunis for more than 2 decades. In her article, she describes her family's life before and after that Israeli settlement was removed. We got our vegetables and fruits directly from the land, both our plot of land and the land around us. Our friends who owned land in this area shared their produce with us, oranges, lemons, and other fruits. Ruwaida recalls 𝐓𝐡𝐞 with fondness. I loved the pure air and the way it would become blanketed in green and flowers during spring. But the occupation constantly casts a shadow over us, she writes. When we still lived in the camp, we would see soldiers from a distance of only a few meters as they patrolled behind the iron fence of the settlement across from us. What Israel now calls the Morag corridor was a short distance from Ruwaida's childhood home, an area she recalls for its natural beauty and abundance. Throughout this genocide, Ruwaida has continued to work, while she and her family try to survive. Among her extraordinary contributions over the last few months is the work she did as Gaza producer for the Encampments, an intimate portrait of the global student movement ignited at Columbia University in the spring of 2024. We'll be talking about that a little later with Kei Pritsker, who co-directed the Encampments. But first, we're so pleased to be joined on the Electronic Intifada live stream by Ruwaida Amer.
Hello. Ruwaida, it's so good to see you.
Ruwaida, thank you so much for joining us. It's really our honor and our pleasure for you to be on the live stream.
Thank you so much.
And in that article that you wrote for us that we published just this week, you wrote, "These are the most terrifying days yet. What do you want the people who are watching and listening to us to know about the situation where you are now and in Gaza more generally? What's happening around you?"
Yes, I want to say something about this war. From the beginning of this war, I hope it to stop very fast, to finish in just for 2 weeks, 1 week, a few days, and to stop. But it took a long time, like more than 16 months. So every day, yeah, I want to talk about myself. It be very long, and I want to stop. I wanted this war to stop very fast because remembered my memories before the war, because the life in Gaza, it was totally different between before and after the war. So all my thinking about when this war will finish, because day by day the situation will be very bad, very hard, because there is pumping around us, because they're pumping everywhere in Gaza. There is nowhere peace or safe for anyone. So we want to be in safe. So we want to be to stop this war. Okay, so that's my thinking. So when I wrote any article, I feel like I missed my last days. I lived in the same days before, like what I wrote in my last article. So the situation here is very, very hard. There is no food, there is no water, there is money. We lose money, children, by pumping, by hunger. So the situation is very terrible, and nothing changed to the best, no, to the worst. So this is our worry day by day, because the war is not to stop, but there's bombing continue with very hard, not just today is good, tomorrow, like yesterday is bad. No, every time is hard for me, for the people in Gaza, because there, as I told you, there is just bombing, no safe, no water, no food, no anything, no life.
But
Ruwaida.
you're continuing to work, Ruwaida. You've never stopped working. Why is it so important for you to continue to try to convey to the world what is happening in Gaza? I want to say you have been working with us at the Electronic Intifada now for more than 7 years, and we're very proud of the work that you do. And you do so much reporting with so much energy. How do you keep up that energy with the situation like this?
Yeah, the work during this situation is not easy, by the way. Okay, as I told you, there's no safe. So move between the areas in Gaza Strip, it's not easy. This is the first thing. Second thing is I used to write about the positive side, about good. Maybe you know that because I work with you for a long time. So, you know, I'm looking for good stories, positive stories. Also in my documentaries, my films, my stories, my video stories, I looked for a positive side. Also during the war, when I focused on my stories, I want to write about the children. I want to write about the students. I want to write about the school. And the work is one of the way I can to like escape to the work and just think in my work, because if I will think about what's happening around me, I will lose my mind. Always I said this point. If I want to think about what's happening around me, I will lose my. I will got to be crazy, by the way, because I can't accept or I can't believe how we are living now. Because always I said, when we were before the war, we lived in good situation. We can find eat, food, we can find water like this. But now we are under a very hard situation. So the work, it's not easy, but it's way to like forget what's happening around me. Also, maybe a lot of my articles about my personal experience. Okay, like how's my life before the war? How's my memories? How's my work as a teacher? Because I like my work as a teacher, and I always focus on the children, students, my work as a teacher before the war, and how I lose that during the war. So when I share an encampment film, I focus on the student universities, because I was a student university, and I know how this group need to study in their universities, study in good situation, not just the young people, also the children. So as I told you, the work during no connections, good, no internet, very good, no save. But we are working because always we used to be strong. I don't know how, but we always be that.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been so diligent. I mean, throughout this genocide, but also before it, you always, managed to really paint pictures with your words, with your video, of daily life. And it, like you said, like before the genocide, there was already, 16 years of a siege on Gaza.
Yes.
And, so to go from that,
And
to
we
what,
lived.
yeah,
Okay, and we lived in just, it's not the first war in our life. No, we
of
lived
course.
maybe, during maybe more than 5 wars, okay? But this war is totally different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we don't have any words can describe this war. I know we lived in siege for many years, and I have a lot of memories about it. And we lived in many challenge, suffering from everything. Okay, but not like this war. This war, it's totally different. This war is different story.
Yeah.
Okay, we lived in many. I know we lived in many wars, but not like this. This no, there. This war, there's no life. Our life is like temporary, okay? But before this war, maybe the life is not very good, too much, a little bit, but better than no. So, uh, so we don't know if we are unsafe or not. We don't know if you will still alive or not. So this war, you can't describe it. So I want to tell you something. If I will write million stories, okay? It's not just one or two hundreds or thousands. There's no story can describe the situation in Gaza. When you come to Gaza, you will see the real situation, okay? And I think many people visited Gaza, like medical groups, said that by their interviews. What you see in the or what you watch on TV, it's not like the reality life in Gaza. So, as I told you, this war is totally different before.
Ruwaida, you mentioned, I mentioned that you've worked with us now for more than 7 years. And you mentioned that in your work before this war and always, you tried to focus on showing life in Gaza, showing positive things. And in fact,
Yeah.
when you started working with us, I think it was in 2017, you started producing a number of videos, short documentaries about life in Gaza, aspects of life people don't usually see. For example, they include reports about a girls' football team, about
Yeah.
musicians playing the oud, about a karate team for blind athletes. There was one about an artist who made these incredible sculptures out of matchsticks, Palestinian theater and puppeteers. We've put together this short clip which shows some of the scenes from some of those short documentaries that you made for the Electronic Intifada starting in 2017. We'll watch those together and then we'll get you to talk about them.
Yeah. Also, I want to tell you,
Yeah, we'll watch them and then we'll get your comment. Let's go ahead and watch.
yeah, all the people we film, all the people we filmed with them during about the life, the peace life, want to live. They had, I don't know if they still alive or not. Okay, some of them we lose them. Okay, but they had like dreams. They had a future. They wanted to achieve money goals. So okay, we are living under occupation, under siege, but we have dreams. We like the life, so we want to live in peace. So there is, if you want to see all my documentaries, videos, you will see positive sides. There is intelligent and there is smart people. They thinking about how to like do things from nothing. Okay, like this we were under the siege, and this siege now during the war, it's no comment about it. No, nothing, no life under this siege. We don't have food to complete our time. So now I'm talking with you, and I feel like I will lose my mind because there is no good food to be strong enough. Okay, and this videos were before the war, so about like positive people drowsed, played music, play footballs, disabled people, and but they were played the football, basketball. So we have positive side, but we don't like the words. We don't like this situation. We want this word to stop. When the I want to say maybe this is the first time talk to you about this. This is when they stop the war, the ceasefire before 2 months. I feel like my soul back to me. I'm good. I can talk with my colleagues. I can go to the north. You know, I'm in the south and I live in the south. But I like Gaza City. I like to go there. I shocked and surprised about the huge destruction in Gaza City, and I didn't know the streets and the places. I missed my school. I missed the streets. I asked the people, where is this school? Where is this place? Where is this bank like this? Because they changed the picture of Gaza City, but we are good because there is no pumping. Because I can go to anywhere in safe. My family don't worry about me. I can go to my work. I can make my stories, and I produce a documentary during this fire in Jabal Camp. So I we try to back to our normal life. The people in Gaza Strip during this fire try to back to their normal life despite the huge destruction. They bought tents and back to their areas and looking for small or simple works, and step by step they wanted to back to their normal because we are love the life. We want to live in the peace. The ceasefire for us and the end of the war, it's very big meaning for us. That's mean we are still alive. That means there's our children not worried, and our children back to their schools. They're simple schools without chairs, without tables, without boards. They like sit on the ground and look at their teachers, but they want to live. They want to complete their lives. They want to back to their studies. So as I told you, we want to back to our normal life, and I want to back to positive stories. I didn't find any positive stories during the war, by the way. All the stories, it's very sad. So I'm trying to write about my memories because my memories is full of positive energy, positive sides, dreams, and I lose people in my memories, but may they are in good place now, better than this life.
Allah yarhamhum. We know how many people you and those around you have lost. And Ruwaida, you're an extraordinary journalist, and the articles you've written for the Electronic Intifada throughout this genocide are incredible pieces of writing, and we're very grateful for them. And the short documentaries you did for us over the years, starting in 2017, are incredible documentation of life in Gaza before this genocide. And as you said, we don't know about the fate of many of the people in those documentaries, and no doubt many of the places there are destroyed, but you preserved them. And I hope people will go to the Electronic Intifada's YouTube channel and go back a few years and watch those documentaries to know what Gaza was like, and hopefully will be again. We're all praying for a ceasefire. Ruwaida, just before you go, we know you have to go in a moment, but just before you go, I want to mention, as I did at the outset, that you are the Gaza field producer for the new feature documentary, The Encampments, which is now The Encampments, which is now in movie theaters around the United States. We just want to really congratulate you on your extraordinary work with that film. I saw it. I told you this. I saw the film in the cinema in Chicago, and everybody around me, it was full. Everyone was so moved by it, especially the scenes of the people in Gaza that you filmed. And I just now, before you go, I want to bring on Kei Pritsker. He co-directed The Encampments with Michael T. Workman. He's a journalist with Breakthrough News, which co-produced The Encampments with Watermelon Pictures. And of course, the rapper Macklemore was the executive producer. So I just wanted to give you a chance to say hello to each other before you have to go, Ruwaida.
Yes, hello, how are you? Congratulations about your I saw many comments about the film, and as I told you, the people and the students, universities in Gaza, they were so excited for this film because they saw the people out Gaza support them, wanted the war to stop, and asked the rights of Palestinian in Gaza Strip. And when we filmed the stories in Gaza Strip, I was in so bad situations. I injured during this, and I evacuated my home. So when we filmed this story, the students, we filmed that with them in Gaza Strip. They were so excited to tell the people about their experience during the war because they lost their education or study in the universities, and their universities destroyed. All the universities in Gaza is destroyed, and they were trying to complete their study during online system, but it was so hard for them because there is no internet, there is no connection, and they wanted to tell the people during our film about this so bad experience, and they said thank you for the people who support their rights to live in peace, to be in safe, and to back to their study in their university. So it was so great to film this part in Gaza during this war, and was so happy to receive many comments from all the people about this work, and any good comment support us to complete our work and to ask every day, every time to stop this war and back to our safe and peace life.
Yeah, I mean, I just think anyone that's seen the film knows that all of the film would not be what it is without Ruwaida's contributions, and every single shot from Gaza was shot by her and her team. And yeah, you helped bring the story to life, and you helped bring forward the truth of the encampments, which the students were always insisting on, which is that this movement was always about Gaza. It was never about anything but Gaza. And that's what the students wanted us to get across more than anything. They always told us this is not about us. This is not about our school academic careers or anything like that. We don't care about any of that. This is everything we do is for Gaza. And without Ruwaida, we wouldn't have been able to show that. We wouldn't have had a film. So we're just grateful for all the work. And yeah, we're going to continue sort of talking about it and centering Gaza, as everyone has said.
Yeah.
Well, I second that. It's an extraordinary film in very large part thanks to the incredible work that Ruwaida and her team did in Gaza, and I hope many people will see it. And Ruwaida, we know you have to go. We're so grateful that you could spend some time with us today, and we hope to have you back. And we encourage people to read your latest article at the electronicintifada.net, as well as to check out the videos, the beautiful documentaries you've made over many years. And we are all praying for this war to end as quickly as possible, and for you, your family, and all your loved ones to remain safe. And come back and join us again soon.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope to hear very soon about good news to stop this war and live in peace and back to our normal life. My students and my school, I missed them too much. And I will keep working as a journalist as usual. Thank you so much. And much love and peace from Gaza.
Love from all of us to you, Ruwaida, and to everyone in Gaza. Thank you.
Oh, God. Yeah. She's extraordinary. And yeah, I mean, Kei, as you said, like her work in the film, those shots that she filmed of, you know, the ruins of the Islamic University of Gaza and of you know, the many like vocational colleges, you know, when and we'll get into this obviously, but the way that the encampments juxtaposes, you know, these politicians that you're seeing right now, these pundits, you know, saying that people somehow feel unsafe on campus because they hear the word Palestinian, or they, you know, their feelings might get hurt, while places like Al-Isra University, Islamic University of Gaza, are being razed to the ground by our tax dollars, by those, you know, those votes by those very politicians. It was just, it's, I mean, the movie itself is incredibly moving. I've seen it twice already, and it's extraordinary, and to center Gaza in the way that it was centered was just so well done.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, you know, that is really one of the things that was one of the goals of the film, was to sort of recenter or just bring back the focus to what the students were really trying to bring attention to. I mean, the media did such a masterful job of completely distracting from the real issue at hand. You know, it's like if you watched any of the commentary from the mainstream media, from these pundits, they were talking about all of this. The accusations of anti-Semitism. Oh, it's a den of violence. Oh, these people are bigots. They're hateful. And it's like none of these people had ever set foot on an encampment. None of them had ever talked to any of the students. And of course, you know, anyone that's been in the Palestine movement, you know, for a long time, or even just the last 2 years, you should know by now that this issue is a distraction. It is, this talking point is a distraction issue, and it is really the central talking point that the Zionist lobby has concocted to just falsely blemish and accuse and slander people as racists and bigots. I don't even.
Look, Kei, well, we're going to come back to that, but since we had just spoken with Ruwaida, and we wish she could have stayed with us, but let's watch a clip from the encampments, which includes some of her footage and brings that focus to Gaza. So let's take a look at that now.
Israel has destroyed every single university in Gaza.
Yes! Yes! חנוכה שמח, עם ישראל!
سلاح لأي أمة هو شبابها الواعي المثقف اللي هيؤدي بطبيعة الحال لبنائها. إسرائيل تستهدف المدارس والجامعات والمراكز الثقافية والمؤسسات الثقافية والمسارح والمكاتب علشان أهم سلاح لأي أمة هو تعليمها. إسرائيل شو عملت من 17 إسرائيل دمرتنا ولا شيء ضايل في غزة.
So just for those who are listening, we saw some of the footage that the Israeli army itself published of them detonating, completely destroying several of the major universities in Gaza. And then we saw some of the beautiful footage by Ruwaida and that interview that she filmed with the journalist 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥�2 talking about the situation. And that type of footage is interspersed throughout the film, where you always bring it back to Gaza.
Yeah, and this is what the Israel lobby, this is what the Trump administration, this is what the Zionists in America don't want people to see. Is they don't want people to see the reality of the matter. They do everything they can to shift the blame or to try to tell people that what they're seeing on their phone screens, what they're seeing on TV, isn't what they're actually seeing, that there's this missing mythical context that they don't understand. And I think that's exactly why we wanted to bring Ruwaida into the film, why we had to bring footage from Gaza and show people the reality, because it speaks for itself. And there's nothing in this world that justifies what people are seeing, and people's reaction is exactly the way people should be reacting to a live stream genocide.
Yeah. And Kei, one of the people that the encampments focuses on is Mahmoud Khalil, of course, the Palestinian student leader who was arrested by the U.S. government, Gestapo forces, on March 8th. He remains in prison. He's not been accused of any crime, of course, but the Trump administration is attempting to deport him on the absurd pretext that his advocacy for Palestinian rights interferes somehow with U.S. foreign policy. His arrest was the start of this massive ongoing crackdown. Let's take a look at this clip from the encampments of Mahmoud Khalil speaking.
So can you talk about some of the risks that Palestinian students and other international students take in speaking out and being vocal on this?
Of course, a lot of the Palestinian students here, they feel very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable participating and protesting the genocide of their people. That's why we are very grateful for everyone on campus for protesting on our behalf.
And what would happen to you if you were deported?
I will live. We will continue to live. The Palestinian people have been under occupation, ethnic cleansing, and all sorts of crimes since 1948. And we prevailed. We will prevail no matter what will happen.
Yeah, so those were pretty prescient words from Mahmoud Khalil, and they show that the students continued to speak out, even knowing that they faced personal danger. You were there when the students first set up their encampment at Columbia University in New York City, and you caught these moments in the film. And as we know, this inspired similar solidarity encampments on campuses across the U.S. I believe it was 300. And around the world, many of which were shut down by police and university administrations with incredible brutality. When you started making this film, did you already understand that you were witnessing something historic?
Yeah, I did. That was, I think, clear from the moment the encampment started to spread after the students got arrested at Columbia. I mean, because really what you're seeing, what the encampments were a referendum, not just on Palestine, but on the ability, on the so-called right of the United States to dictate to the world who should live and who should die, who should be in power and who should not, who has the right to life, who has the right to water, who has the right to happiness and education, and who does not. And this was a mass uprising of the next generation. as Ali says in the film, I mean, these are the people who make opinions, who decide the course of history for the next generations. These students who, are expected to fill the shoes of the generals and the Pentagon and the diplomats, rejecting all of the flashy bribes, the little trinkets, the things they wave in people's faces. Oh, you could be a successful diplomat. You could be this. You could have a wonderful job and a career. And the students said, we don't care about any of that, actually. We don't care about your blood money. We don't care about your bribes. We don't care about any of this. All we care about is Gaza, and we're willing to risk anything for it. And I think it was so powerful, not just that it was Columbia students, Ivy League students, but that it was all students across America and the world who were saying, we don't care what you do to us. We don't care how you slander us. We don't care if you blackmail our employers. We don't care about any of that. We support Gaza, and we will take whatever you throw at us.
And Kei, you mentioned that I do appear in the film, which is a great honor for me, and I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity. But really, the students who you just mentioned are front and center in this film. And so let's take a clip let's watch another clip that focuses on some of the students who are sort of the main focus of the US side of this film. Let's watch that.
Needed to place pressure again on the administration to reopen negotiations.
We knew that we needed to escalate further. The idea of an occupation of Hamilton Hall along the lines of the 1968 protests was something that people were always sort of considering.
When we felt that there was no further progress to be made in negotiations and any engagement with administration, then it seemed like the perfect time. When it first happened, I think was one of the most joyful moments of my life. The picket was so strong, the chants were so beautiful. It was just like an electric moment.
Hind Hall is named after Hind Rajab, who was a 6-year-old Palestinian girl from Gaza who was assassinated by the Israeli terrorist forces.
She was in a car fleeing Gaza City with an aunt and uncle and some cousins when they were shot at. She was alive while the rest of the family was killed, and she called the Palestinian Red Crescent Society. They dispatched an ambulance to save her. The ambulance and the medics inside were also intentionally killed by the occupation.
And the next part is the full audio recording of Hind, the little 6-year-old girl, on the phone with the Palestine Red Crescent dispatch. And that part always, completely destroys me, and I know a lot of people. And the fact that the students stood on the shoulders of the anti-war protesters in 1968 and knew that the occupation of Hamilton Hall was going to be a turning point in their struggle at Columbia, and renaming it after Hind Rajab. It's incredibly moving, and I don't even. It's gorgeous. Can you talk a little bit about the student leaders that you met while making this film, and those who talked about the steps that they were prepared to take to pressure Columbia while they were facing so much pressure, and eventually, as we know, violence from the university and the New York Police Department.
Yeah, I don't think the interviews we shot with the sort of main characters, the student leaders, they were 3-4 hours long. I mean, these were very long interviews, and a lot of it, obviously, we couldn't show just for the sake of time, but I wish we could. And I say that because, you know, I think there's this stereotype that's been built by the media, by the Zionist lobby, to say, oh, these students, they're just edgy. Like, they just want to be cool. They just want to skip class. They just want to do something like rebellious. They don't really know what they're talking about. And you know, you see it in the film, but I just want people to know there's so much more to each of their stories about why they care about Palestine. Like, it is so the opposite of, oh, I just saw a TikTok one day, and, you know, the way they're trying to make it out to be. These student leaders, I mean, this is their life. I mean, you know, you talk about Mahmoud. I mean, this is the story of his family's life for 3 generations. Yeah. There's no way he can separate himself from this. Same goes for Nai. Same goes for Ruwaida. Ruwaida, who's not Palestinian, was so deeply impacted by her trip there that she decided to dedicate the rest of her life to it. I mean, these are people that it's not just knowing the issue of Palestine. I mean, they don't see themselves as separate from the Palestinians. They don't want to live in a world where they just go to work and they live their life while people are being bombed and killed. They see themselves and their lot in life as one with the people in Gaza. And yeah, I mean, I say that to say I wish we could share the whole story, but these students are completely selfless in their devotion to Gaza and Palestine.
It's really, I mean, it's you know, we're just showing some clips so people can see the incredible filmmaking, but the emotional experience of watching this film with other people in the movie theater was very intense. It's really extraordinary. Let's take a look at another clip, and this is of someone who is their identity is hidden, but we'll get you to talk about that afterwards. But let's watch that clip.
I was approached on campus by several students. They were concerned that the deaths of Palestinians would be minimized, if not just completely ignored in the statements coming out from the school. And I asked them what they wanted me to do. And they said, could you just please start putting some numbers into these statements? You know, absolutely acknowledge the Israelis who have lost their lives, but also could you please put in the number of Palestinians who lost their lives, just so people can see? I brought that back to my boss, and what they said to me was this: who are these students? And I said, well, I didn't get their names. And they said, no, who were they? And I said, well, it was a couple women, there was a man. They said, do I have to spell it out for you? What did they look like? What color was their skin? Were they wearing scarves? And I didn't feel comfortable answering that question. Then I was admonished and told to not fall into a, quote, skewed perspective that I would be getting from students throughout this crisis.
So, yeah, what are we watching there, Kai?
So this is one of the administrators at Columbia who was intimately involved in the communications of the university after October 7th. And this is someone who was not like a Palestinian activist. This is someone who was not, you know, such a someone who was like immediately on the side of the students or anything like that. And in drafting university communications was told over and over and over to basically skew all the communications to exclude any relevant context that Israel was blockading Gaza, that they had been pursuing a genocidal policy there for years and years and years, about the occupation, about the Nakba, and basically was just skewing the university's perspective all to the side of Israel. And, you know, this person felt so compelled or so moved by the bias and the slant of the university that they started speaking out on some other podcasts. That's how we found this person. Is we heard a podcast that they were participating on, and we asked them if they wanted to be in our film to tell the same story. And yeah, I mean, this interview basically tells you exactly what we all knew was happening, which is that Columbia University is absolutely conscious, aware, and intentionally skewing their communications, skewing all of their policies, skewing the enforcement of their policies towards the pro-Israel student groups on campus and towards their pro-Israel donors. There were a lot of parts of this interview also that we didn't have time to include, but maybe that's something we should do is bring out more of this interview later.
Yeah,
absolutely. Maybe in the old days we'd say that would be in the DVD, but maybe
extras,
you can put up a website with some of these incredible interviews.
Yeah.
And Kai, just since the film has been released, it's been having a really big impact. It's been the many showings across the US have been sold out. It even gathered interest from the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, not surprising. And one of their journalists tried to interview. You made a video about that for Breakthrough News about what happened. And we're just going to watch about the first minute and a half of your video. It's actually 11 minutes long, and people can go find it at Breakthrough News. I highly recommend it. It's
fantastic.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But we're just going to watch a little bit of it now.
Israeli newspaper Haaretz tried to run a hit piece against us, decided they didn't like my answers mid-interview, and hung up on me. Luckily, I recorded the whole thing. 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿, a New Jersey-based writer for Haaretz, emailed me last week asking if he could interview me about our film, The Encampments, which is about the student movement in solidarity with Gaza. I agreed, and we set up a Zoom call. But as soon as the interview started, his first question was, why didn't you include anything about the Jewish students at Columbia who were spit on and assaulted? And I said pretty plainly back, who are these students? And there was dead silence. And he tries asking this again, same thing. And at this point, I noticed he wasn't actually running a recording on the Zoom call, but was instead typing down what I was saying. So out of an abundance of caution, I started running a voice memo on my end. And this is where it starts.
I mean, what happened? I mean, tell me about. I mean, I'm curious. I don't know about who was spit on. Which Jewish students were spit on?
Okay.
After I asked him more to tell me about this alleged anti-Semitic spitting incident, he tells me to read Columbia's report about it.
For example, there was a report by Columbia University after that the way they handled anti-Semitism, and they admitted they failed in the way they handled that.
At this point, it should probably already be clear that this guy hasn't read the report himself, because if he had read the report, he would know that in the 91 pages, there are 2 quotes from students who claim they were spit on, and there's no actual evidence it happened. There are no photos, no videos, no verifiable testimony. Mind you, during those 2 weeks, Columbia's campus was probably the most photographed and videographed square mile on the planet.
Yeah.
So, talk about and again, that whole report you did, it's 11 minutes where we hear more of this ridiculous conversation with the Haaretz reporter, and you just did this incredible job of dismantling his propaganda, and it's amazing. It's so good. But really the question is, he came into that interview saying, why didn't you show all these anti-Semitic incidents that happened? And this is, of course, addressed in the encampment. So my question to you, Kai, is how much anti-Semitic, I mean, let me put it this way. If you look at any mainstream media coverage of Columbia and other campuses, it's taken for granted that there were, in fact, anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish students. What's the reality that you found, particularly at Columbia?
Yeah, I mean, this was, it was honestly one of the most jarring things about the coverage and the narrative that they were able to spin and convince people actually that there was this atmosphere of anti-Semitism or hate. I mean, it just goes to show if you repeat a lie enough, like, it becomes true. And that's really what we set out to debunk, because there was no anti-Semitism. Like, it is remarkable because the whistleblower says it, and I say in that video, but really, I mean, the Columbia campus was being filmed 24/7, and it's like, if it was even a fraction of how you're describing it, that it was this den, this cesspool of anti-Semitism, there must be some evidence, but I haven't seen any. In fact, I went out to watch the October 8 film, which is the pro-Zionist film
God, I'm
that's in
so
theaters.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to, see what the opposing narrative was, and even in that film, there's not a single legitimate anti-Semitic act in that film. What there is, however, is students at Columbia or other campuses saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." People saying "Free Palestine," wearing keffiyehs, and that was one of the parts that the whistleblower actually talked about. Is he was responsible for tracking some of these anti-Semitic incidents, which Columbia has this whole log of anti-Semitic incidents that took place at Columbia, and like almost all of them are related to, like, someone said "Free Palestine" in my vicinity, someone in my class wore keffiyeh, someone said that we should read this Palestinian book. Apparently there was one person that actually complained that there was a Palestinian student in his class. So it's like, I mean, it is absolutely remarkable, but the truth is the opposite. The truth is that the Colombian encampment, as well as all the encampments around the country, so many of them were full of this new generation of young anti-Zionist Jewish students and anti-Zionist Jews in general, who are beginning to realize that Judaism has nothing to do with having a Jewish supremacist ethno-state, and that actually Jews can be perfectly happy and safe in America and other places, and that it's actually Israel that's making them unsafe by bombing schools, bombing hospitals, and then saying this is the most Jewish thing ever. So I mean, it's an absurd. It is an absurd narrative for sure.
Yeah. No, it's like complete gaslighting on a massive scale, and yeah, it's ridiculous.
And just one more thing, if I can add. I mean, you can, if you meet some of these students and you talk to some of these people who are trying to perpetuate this narrative. I mean, I don't think it takes too much common sense or too much intuition to see that this is really a performance. Like, and it has always been a performance by the Zionist lobby and Zionist advocates in the United States. They perform this. Oh my God, I'm so hurt. I'm so scared. I'm so this, that, and the other.
Victimized. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you really just, on one hand, you're talking about people who are saying, like, they're being hurt by words, or like being told that they are supporting a genocide. Meanwhile, the students on the other side are protesting an actual genocide. Like, the disparity between the sort of the acts or the so-called violence that's being discussed is like tremendous. And I think the fact that one side is talking about an actual genocide and like 80% of all structures in Gaza being destroyed, the entire health system being destroyed, the entire education system being destroyed, and the other side is saying, like, yeah, I can't support my genocidal ethno-state anymore without being called like names. It's like, wow, this is insanity.
Yeah, it is. It completely is. And then of course, the university administrations, obviously, after last year's student intifada, over the summer, it's very clear that, they kind of coordinated these attack plans to, enact these policies and mandates for potential student protests on their campuses. I mean, here in California, the University of California system has, banned masks, and said that all protests need to be pre-approved. Of course, now they're trying to say that even the word Zionism as if you criticize people and use the word Zionist in a derogatory way, whatever, that can be considered racist and a hate crime. And we see also physical violence once again happening by cops on student protesters. Just yesterday at UCLA, there was a screening of the encampments, which took place on the day, I think it was the very day to the year, a year ago to the day, when UCLA cops and Zionist thugs assaulted the encampment at UCLA. So the UCLA students then were going to show a screening of the encampments about UCLA cops beating protesters. And then what happened? This is from last night. The UCLA called the cops again and had the students attacked. I mean, how do you make sense of this? What's your reaction to how administrations are kind of doubling down on their thought crime policing of student and student activity on campuses?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it's like I kind of marvel at the absurdity of just they really have not learned their lesson. Like they are doing exactly what the started the whole encampment movement in the first place, the arrest of the Columbia students, which is, this repression and censorship, which was so outrageous to the entire world that they decided to follow in the steps of the Columbia students. But on the other hand, like it makes perfect sense. And this is what we've been saying from the beginning is that, what the encampment movement really showed is that the students and the future generation, the Palestinian movement has won. It has won the narrative. It has won the battle for the narrative. It has won the battle for hearts and minds. The Israel lobby, Israel has completely lost its legitimacy in the realm of public opinion. I mean, there was that poll that said for the first time Americans have a majority negative view of Israel, and this is only going to compound as more of these students, these younger people take positions in society and sort of they are the future. And this is really this is the logical end game of Zionism. I mean, because they've lost the narrative, because they've completely lost public opinion, the only tool they have left is outright repression. The only tool they have is censorship. The only tool they have is to say, you actually can't talk about Palestine anymore. We're going to make it illegal to talk about Palestine. We're going to deport you if you talk about Palestine. And apparently now we're going to arrest you, beat you, send riot cops on you if you even watch a movie about Palestine or about the encampments. I mean, they're so afraid of just they're afraid of the act or just the existence or the acknowledgement that Palestine exists, that people support it. So I'm not surprised that UCLA did this. I'm not surprised that there was this coordinated push to attack the encampments. And, it's also worth noting that this kind of just it just kind of proves the point of the film, which is that all of these universities are controlled by private donors, and whatever the private donor's agenda is becomes the agenda of the university. And for many of these universities, the donors support Israel. There are these rabid racist Zionists. So then that becomes the agenda of the university. And all of a sudden, millions of dollars, people, these riot cops hired by the universities, are all the money of the universities being spent to like beat the crap out of students because they are beholden to their Zionist donors.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so clear. I know we say it over and over again, but these universities are more interested in their endowments than they are in actually doing. And this is what Mahmoud Khalil says in the film too. Instead of being a university where people come to learn and talk and examine and be with other people from all over the world and learn from them. They're more like a hedge fund. And so what the students were doing, as Mahmoud Khalil says, is trying to return the university back to its foundational roots of being a place and not a bank. Yeah. It's extraordinary.
It's an incredible film. Kai, just before we let you go, I know that many people, after listening to you and seeing these clips, will want to see it. Where and how can people see the encampments?
Yes. So the encampment, we just more or less finished our theatrical run. There's still a few theaters around the country that are running it, but we're doing sort of campus or community screenings now. So we want you to basically show the film, to get the word out there. We made this film as a tool for the movement to show people, people who don't know the truth about the encampments, the truth about Palestine, the Palestine movement, and the people that support it. So we have a form on the Watermelon Pictures website. It's a screening request form, and you can go there and fill out the form, and they will get in touch. Watermelon Pictures, who was our distributor, who's fantastic. This film wouldn't have been what it is without them. They will be in touch with you and help you screen the film, whether it's at a college, your local community center, wherever you might gather with your friends and family. So you can go there and get a screener for the film, and then down the line it'll be available on streaming platforms and stuff like that.
And it is, as you said, it's just finishing a theatrical run where it was in cities across the United States. It was sold out. Every showing was sold out in Chicago, and I know that it was the same across the country. If there are still some theatrical screenings, they will be listed. People can find that out at the Encampments website. If you just search the Encampments film, you'll get to the website. And if you can get into the theater and see it, I highly recommend it. This is really an extraordinary film. Kei Pritsker, you are the co-director of the Encampments with Michael Workman, and you're also a reporter for Breakthrough News. And we are so grateful to you for the work you're doing and for the time you've spent with us on the Electronic Intifada live stream today. Thank you for making this film. And I hope people will take you up on that and try to get this film shown in their communities. It's incredibly powerful.
It is.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be on here, and thank you for all the work you do. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kei.
Thank you, Kei.
Incredible work. Oh, that was a very moving 2 interviews. Yeah. Incredible. But yeah, I mean, the film itself, I can't praise it enough. It's absolutely remarkable. And yeah, like you said, it's sold out everywhere. Really kind of highlighting the fact that the people want this kind of documentary work, that they want to see a real counter to the way that the student movement has been smeared and maligned, and just absolutely undermined by corporate media, by politicians, by university administrators. I mean, the footage that they had of Minouche Shafik, the disgraced former president of the university.
Don't give too many spoilers, because there's some funny moments in this film.
Really
so
funny.
I don't think you should say anything more.
No, I won't. But it is,
people to see it. You want to get people to see it.
Exactly. You will laugh. You will cry. I mean, in both of the movie theaters that I saw the film in, people were loudly jeering at the right places and the right people, and just very visibly and audibly moved by the footage in Gaza. I mean, it was great. So yes, please go see it in the theaters. Bring your friends and family. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So let's bring on Jon Elmer for the Resistance Report.
Great show again.
Following up, yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
she's
and you know, and Ruwaida's article kind of that we just published sort of meshes so well with I think some of what you're gonna talk about, Jon, because she talks about the what it's like living around when the Israeli forces come in and set up a so-called corridor. You show us the maps. You help us understand what's happening on the ground. Her story really kind of looks at it from the perspective of the people who are right there. So
yeah,
those connections.
Check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, John, take it away.
All right, let's do it. All right, so you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 573 since October the 7th. I will be covering Yemen as usual on this episode, but we are going to start in Gaza as you do usually. We'll pull up the first map just to get people situated, as Nora reported in her great news report that you can check out. This is day 61 of total siege on the Gaza Strip. This is the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs mapping. This is the same mapping as last week. They haven't updated this map, but the Israelis have pressed their buffer zones. And as we were just talking, the Moreg corridor that runs between Rafah and Khan Yunis in the south. And we are going to start this week in the north. The Israelis said that they have carried out more than 2,000 airstrikes as of today, and they have killed 2,300 Palestinians, including 700 children, and wounded 6,000 more since the resumption of fighting on March the 18th. The siege of Gaza goes 2 weeks earlier than that, to March the 2nd. So if we take a look at the next map, we can see a zoom in here on northern Gaza. And this is the three battlefields that we'll be talking about, battle spaces. They're not really battlefields still yet. The Israelis are in the corridors, they're in the buffer zone, and they're not very often encountering built up areas at this point. But the key areas of operations that we covered last week were in the upper right corner. There is Beit Hanun on the northeast side of Gaza with the buffer zone you can see in purple overlapping with the orange, which is the displacement orders, no-go zones. And the resistance operations were in that upper corner. They were within 200, 300 meters of the fence, and they were effectively behind Israeli lines, which have pushed up to the edge of that purple. And we're going to focus on that as well this week. So more than 70% of Gaza is now buffer zone or no-go zone. 500,000 have been displaced since the March 18th resumption of the war. The war began on March 18th again with a midnight attack, a surprise attack during the ceasefire. Israel reneged on it by carrying out 80 airstrikes in less than 10 minutes, killing more than 400 people, 170 of them children. Since then, 500,000 people have been displaced in the 6 weeks, and we are now in a situation where 1.9 million people in Gaza are living in tents, living in fabric, or living in shelters. We know those shelters have mostly been destroyed, so even when you're living in a shelter, it's in a tent shelter in the schoolyard that has been already bombed. So we're going to focus on Beit Hanun right now in the upper right corner. As I said, last week we watched Breaking the Sword ambush. It was a tunnel ambush that was executed in the buffer zone. It was called Breaking the Sword as a play on the Israeli campaign names after October 7th. The Israeli military called the war Swords of Iron is what they called, what the Palestinians call Al-Aqsa Flood. And then the March 18th massacre, they called the Strengthened Sword Operation. So Breaking the Swords has been Qassam's names for this series of ambushes in Beit Hanun. And Beit Hanun, to remind viewers, was the first place the Israelis invaded on the 27th of October, 2023, and then the days before, the months before the January 2025 ceasefire were focused on Beit Hanun, and there was a series of operations that I showed you on this program, dozens of operations, ambushes of death series that showed all kinds of operations against the Israelis that took a devastating toll on the Israeli military and really pressed them into the ceasefire that had been on the table since December 2023, and the introduction of the Trump administration allowed them to reach back for that ceasefire, but it was really the resistance operations that pressed them into that position. So if we look at the next slide here, the Breaking the Sword ambush, the first one we watched, this is the fighters. We watched this last week. You can go back and watch the segment. I broke it down at length last week. But these are the fighters emerging in the thicket, out of a tunnel 300 meters from the fence, behind Israeli lines in the buffer zone, still in the Gaza Strip. 300 meters from the fence. So you can see we saw a squad of at least six that we could see on camera, come out and carry out this ambush against an Israeli convoy. And they used this thicket, which you can see if we look at the next slide, you can see how they concealed themselves within this overgrowth, the spring growth in Gaza. Beit Hanun is an agricultural area. The buffer zones are agricultural areas. The Morag corridor, is an agricultural area, as you heard earlier on in the show. And so the fighters are using this. You can see in the upper right corner of this slide here, that's facing you, you can see a fighter almost completely concealed, wearing camouflage to hide in this thicket. And so the Israelis this week carried out an operation. If we look at slide number 5, Channel 12 reported on this, that the Israeli military on Monday began to burn the agricultural fields around Beit Hanun because they thought they had found all the tunnels. That was the operation of the 252nd Division. Their operational mandate was to find the tunnels in the Beit Hanun area. So Operation Breaking the Sword clearly demonstrated that they did not find the tunnels, because that operation was carried out through a tunnel, according to the Israeli military, all of the operations that they have faced since the resumption of war have been tunnel-based operations. So in their infinite wisdom, there are scorched earth. They're literally burning the fields in hopes that that will expose the tunnels. So they've flooded the tunnels, seawater, gas. We heard about all of their explosives that they've used for the tunnels. None of them work. The tunnels still function after 18 months of war more. The tunnels are still functioning, and you can't destroy tunnels by burning fields. But this is a very symbolic visual, because the forest fires began in the Jerusalem area a few days later, not linked to this burn, but this just shows the failure of their operations against the tunnels, and it shows the strategic implications of Qassam's tunnel network that's allowed them to fight this long, and puts the Israelis in a position where Benjamin Netanyahu believes if they stop the war today and accept a ceasefire, that they will have lost the war, because they have not defeated the Qassam brigades in Gaza. So burning, look at the next slide too, number 6, shows a close-up that they showed on Channel 12 on Monday in Israel. But you can see there's the exact thicket, the thistles that those fighters were hiding in is now being burnt. Not clear that that's going to work for concealment, to stop the concealment. Look at the way it is now. It'll still be used. They'll probably just wear a different color of shirt. So there was a second Breaking the Swords ambush here that I'm going to tee up here. We aren't able to show you the full video. It's a twin sniper operation, something that we've seen a couple times throughout the war, but where two Al-Ghul sniper units target the same place. So you have two snipers in different positions targeting the same Israeli force, and that's what we see in this video here. But we've had to edit it to prevent these videos from being taken down. But you'll remember from last week this operation through the fields, and then these RPG attacks on the Israeli position with the Jeep upside down. There was 3 killed, at least 5 seriously wounded. And here's the Breaking the Sword ambush part 2 on the screen. The fighter says they carried out a double sniping operation against soldiers using the Qassam-made Al-Ghul rifle against new positions in the buffer zone. And here's the 4 spots that we have blurred out the soldiers, and here's the twin Qassam Al-Ghul snipers. One of the sniper operations, it said, was not on film. Here we're seeing standing on top of a Merkava tank, you have these tank driver and a Special Forces Yahalom tunnel unit soldier standing on top of the tank. Both are hit by sniper fire, and then the Yahalom unit officer comes and climbs on top of the tank to help the two soldiers who are wounded, which is something we don't see very often. Usually the soldiers run after these sniper attacks, but the Yahalom soldier climbs on top of the tank, and now there's 3 of them on top of the tank, and they're hit with a single round, which we've also seen. A single round hit 2 people, and the Yahalom officer ends up feet in the air going down into the turret hatch of the turret, which is an iconic shot that we can't show on here, but it was the source of a 𝐄𝐿 poster after the fact, and many pictures of it with the boots in the air as he's going down into the tunnel. Abu Obaida, the spokesperson for the 𝐶𝐿 brigades, released a message about this operation where he said, "Our fighters continue to fight heroic battles, carry out well-planned ambushes, and lie in wait for enemy forces to inflict certain death on them at the time, place, and method of our choosing. The exploits of our warriors in the field from Beit Hanun to Rafah is a source of pride. They are feats of military prowess that serve as an example for the next generation of our nation. Our fighters in combat zones and defensive ambushes are ready for confrontation and have pledged to remain steadfast until victory or martyrdom." And that is the point of these operations. The Israelis haven't moved into any built up areas for these operations until this week. And this week we saw the first operations. Last week we saw operations in Tufa in eastern Gaza City. If we look at this next map, you can see the evacuation notice for Zaytun, Shujaiya, and Tufa. These are on the eastern edge of Gaza City. And they announced that. Last week we saw the first Yasin strikes against tanks and armored bulldozers, and we could see from those operations that those bulldozers and tanks were right on the edge of town. This week there was a number of operations in Tufa. There was a Yasin strike versus tanks. There was anti-personnel IEDs in Tufa as well, and a number of rocket artillery operations, and a second series of Yasin strikes. So we're starting to see that when the Israelis push into built-up areas, the resistance is there waiting for them, as we've seen all throughout this battle. They don't run around chasing the Israelis. When the Israelis move into combat zones, which have been moved, civilians have been moved out of these areas, and they fight. And this next clip is actually an interesting one. This is from the Israelis. This shows a Yasin round from their point of view. This is from their tank commander's display unit. The camera is on top of the tank, and you can see from that upper floor window, we're getting an elevated Yasin strike that appears to hit at least the 360-degree panoramic camera that the commander uses and the gunner uses for their sights. The Israelis showed this clip, and then they attached to the other side of the clip. This is just a 10-second clip. The other part was an airstrike on a building. Didn't seem like, didn't show any connection between this building being hit. But that's what, from their point of view, the Israelis put these videos out. They believe that they're showing successes when really they're showing their tank likely being penetrated here. And then the response isn't tank fire from the tank that's hit. It's an airstrike that's many minutes later, more than half an hour later at best, and it's not even clear they're targeting the same position. So that's an interesting shot. We haven't seen that shot from the inside of the tank before. If we look at number 11 here, we have Soraya Al-Quds using improvised launchers here. These are rocket artillery that we watch them fire every week, but instead of launching them on a trajectory in Tufa, you can see they've made a makeshift launcher, and they're going to just fire it directly at an Israeli military position in Tufa, which is something that they have done before. We've shown them using this tactic before, but as you can see, it seems very effective. They hit the exact spot that they want with an artillery rocket that normally is fired on a trajectory arc. But they fire it directly at that position. Also in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜, there was a significant battle that the Israeli military said this week was the toughest battle since the war resumed. It was a 2.5-hour gun battle between the IDF and border police who were operating undercover, and the undercover unit moved into 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜. And as soon as they moved in, they were hit by a tunnel ambush that killed the initial fighters, the Israeli fighters, and then set up a 2.5-hour battle to try to extract those soldiers that were killed at first. So, like I said, the IDF said it was the toughest battle since the war resumed. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐜, the Israeli newspaper, talked to the IDF, and they said there was a multi-layered tunnel ambush where 5 cells appeared one after another, targeting reinforcements, not allowing the Israeli military to get in. It was Yasin strikes, it was snipers, it was small arms fire against the Israeli units coming in. It took more than 2.5 hours to extract what was supposed to be an undercover ambush that was outed by a counter ambush by Qassam. There was multiple Israeli killed, including a tank platoon commander from the 401st Armored Division. That's the Iron Tracks division that the Qassam brigades have pointed out. The casualties from that unit are significant in the many dozens throughout this battle. So that is 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜 and Gaza City, eastern Gaza City. We've looked at the north here, and after this, we will move to the south. This is the map and what it looks like in the south. Rafah is completely cut off. It is a no-go zone, no population in Rafah. It's been completely depopulated, and the Israelis are in there knocking down whatever buildings remain from before. In the bottom of that image, below the Rafah crossing there, that's where Kerem Shalom is, the main crossing where food was coming in before the 61-day siege. That's completely closed at this point now, and the Morag corridor cuts across through that. You can see the dotted line. Essentially, the Morag corridor follows the governorate line between Rafah and Khan Yunis. And so there was operations by the resistance in the Philadelphia corridor, which is the purple line at the bottom along the border with Egypt, and then the Morag corridor that they're carving is up along that dotted line, essentially, that you see cutting Khan Yunis from Rafah. And there was a complex resistance operation in the Philadelphia corridor on the western side of the corridor this week. IED and small arms complex ambush that wounded at least 4 IDF soldiers next to Tel Sultan. Tel Sultan is on the western edge of the Philadelphia corridor. And also this week, during a promotional video for a new artillery rocket ammunition that the Israelis have been using in the Morag corridor, the Israeli military said that the 282nd Artillery Brigade has launched more than 5,000 shells and artillery rockets at the Morag corridor since they began that operation 2 or 3 weeks ago. And also they took the military, they took Army radio on a tour of the Morag corridor. And while they were in there, the Army radio correspondent asks why there's not military pressure in Rafah, why they're only in these corridors, why is it very limited, why don't we go for, quote, a big maneuver and get the real large centers of gravity of Qassam. And here, he says, is perhaps one explanation. The commander of the 205th Reserve Brigade of the Israeli military said that the only reserve brigade fighting in Rafah, and it reveals that of his fighters that have reported, barely half to 2/3 have reported back. So you have half of their reserve soldiers have not come back to continue the fight. They are either AWOL or on approved leave because they can't handle the war lasting this long. And so they don't have the fighting force to carry out the kind of maneuvers that Army radio seems to be calling for. So that's why we get these operations in the buffer zone. That's why we get these promotional videos of new weapons, because the Israelis aren't actually fighting in these areas, in these concentrations. They're not fighting 𝐓𝐡𝐞. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is in the same strength that they were before this. The war is against civilians. If we look at the next slide, this was a rescue operation that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 released this week. They said that the Israelis bombed a site where their captives, or the prisoners of war, who are all soldiers at this point, so Israeli prisoners of war. And Abu Ubaidah told us early on that they were not going to move captives from the areas that Israel put under evacuation orders. They were going to stay there. 15 days ago, Abu Ubaidah said that they lost contact with the American soldier who's fighting and is captured. 30 days ago was when they said they weren't moving prisoners from the evacuation zones. At this point, we know that there are 59 captives still in Gaza. 22 of them are alive, and they are soldiers. And so this is an interesting operation that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 showed that they're protecting. And we had to cut it out because we're not showing, we haven't been showing any prisoners of war, but you can see at the end of this video, after they dig him out of the tunnel, which this video shows a lot. It shows a lot about the way the tunnels operate. And when they say they're cut off from, when 𝐓𝐡𝐞 releases a message saying that they're cut off from their, that fighters or guards or captives are cut off, you can see very clearly what it means there. That's a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighter digging in the tunnel. And we have cut out the part where the Israeli prisoner of war is given oxygen and his life has been saved. The 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters are speaking in Arabic and Hebrew to him, trying to follow him, and they say more details to follow on that. So that is the Resistance Report news from Gaza. Let's now turn to Yemen, where the United States has joined the war on March 15th to attack Yemen to allow for Israel to carry out its genocide in Gaza. This is day 47 of the U.S. attack on Yemen. To defend the genocide, U.S. attacks began on March 15th, shortly after the Yemenis said that they were going to blockade Israeli shipping, and ships that service Israeli ports would be blockaded, following Israel's March 2nd announcement that Gaza would be sealed off. It is notable, and I've pointed this out every week, that there are still no reports of even there's been zero attacks, but no reports, maritime reports, of even warnings sent to ships in the Red Sea. They're either not sailing through, and these have all been military attacks. The Central Command, the United States part of the military that oversees the Middle East, talks about 24/7 operations. And the Yemenis have carried out more than 80 operations since the March 15th war began, with upwards of 200 missiles and drones targeting Israel itself or the U.S. aircraft carriers. And the United States Central Command on Sunday said that their forces had struck more than 800 targets in the 6 weeks, killing hundreds, they said, which matches on land reports from the Yemenis that say hundreds have been killed. And like I said, Central Command says they are, quote, 24/7 operations. And they put the hashtag on their messages, Houthis are terrorists, even though the fact that they're targeting in this war only military targets who are bombing their country. So it gives you a good idea of what, I mean, we all know what the Americans call terrorists. Just anyone who fights for liberation against them is a terrorist. And anyone, the Israelis bombing civilians, the word terrorism doesn't have anything to do with civilians. It has to do with attacking military people, which is clearly not the definition of terrorism. So anyways, the 800 targets is the number of targets. It's not the number of munitions dropped. Many of them have multiple strikes on a single target. Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansar Allah, said that there's been more than 1,500 airstrikes since March 15th, 220 per week. The strikes are carried out by fighter jets on 2 aircraft carriers that are in the region, which we can see from this first map. We'll show you the area that we're talking about. The Bab el-Mandab at the bottom is the choke point going into the Red Sea. In the upper left is the Suez Canal. And you can see Israel there above Saudi Arabia and Jordan, the target for the missile and drone attacks from Yemen. And the American warships can be seen. The American warships are, one of the aircraft carriers is in the north of the Red Sea, almost up at the top, more than 1,000 kilometers from Yemen. And the other carrier, that's the USS Truman, and the other carrier is the USS Carl Vinson, and it's in the Arabian Sea, about equidistant as the Truman on the other direction, staying as far away from Yemeni ballistic and cruise missiles, anti-ship ballistic and cruise missiles and drones. Also yesterday, the United Kingdom announced that they had joined the war. They sent 4 Typhoon fighter aircraft to strike Yemen, which was carried out from their air base in Cyprus. And the Pentagon admitted this week, confirmed what we reported last week on the Electronic Intifada, that 7 MQ-9 Reaper drones had been down by the Yemenis since March 15th, and there's actually an 8th one that was down before March 15th, between March 2nd and March 15th, when the blockade began. So that brings the number to 22 that the Americans have effectively admitted to all of them. And we know from the Signal chat, the U.S. Signal chat that was released to a journalist, that we know how these MQ-9 Reapers are integrated into the U.S. strike packages. They're not simply intelligence. They have strike capabilities. And I showed, you can watch last week's show if you missed it. I covered 2 of these drones going down, and both of the drones that went down were armed. And you could tell by the explosions that they were armed, and they're integrated into these strike packages. Earlier in the month, the New York Times commented from Pentagon officials. The New York Times reported Pentagon officials' comments that acknowledged that there had been only limited success in destroying the Houthis' vast and largely underground arsenal of missiles, drones, and launchers that are built in Yemen. If we look at the next map, you can see the positioning from the United States Naval Institute of the 2 carrier strike groups, the aircraft carrier Harry S. Truman, and the Harry S. Truman has its accompanying guided missile destroyers and cruisers that protect it. There in the North Red Sea, and the Carl Vinson, as I said, is off the coast of Oman. And there was a note sent out by CENTCOM that described all of the targeting, and the commander, the captain of the commanding officer, Captain Chowda Hill, who is the commanding officer of the USS Truman, he was previously the commanding officer of the Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier strike group that was previously fighting the Yemenis in the Red Sea. So he has a lot of experience with this. And the CENTCOM press release was long and detailed, but Chowda Hill, the commanding officer of the Truman, he pulled out one section of that, and it was this section. The strikes have destroyed multiple command and control facilities, air defense systems, advanced weapons manufacturing facilities, advanced weapons storage locations. These storage facilities housed advanced conventional weapons, including anti-ship ballistic and cruise missiles, unmanned aerial systems, drones, and uncrewed surface vessels, which were employed in Houthi attacks on international shipping. So you can see there from Central Command that the Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces have advanced conventional weapons built by themselves, stored in underground bunkers in the mountains, and you can see why those strikes are not effective, like the New York Times quoted those Pentagon officers as having said. So the story this week if we look at the next slide, came from the Navy. And on Monday, they sent out this pretty bland press release that simply said the USS Harry S. Truman lost an FA-18 Super Hornet assigned to Strike Fighter Squadron 136 and a tow tractor as an aircraft carrier operated in the Red Sea on April 28th. All personnel are accounted for, with one soldier injured. The FA-18 was actively under tow in the hangar bay when the move crew lost control of the aircraft, and the aircraft and the tow tractor were lost overboard. Sounds like an innocent little accident that happened. CNN followed it up. We can see that on the next slide. They immediately contacted their Pentagon sources and found out that a U.S. official on the scene said that indicated that the Truman had made a hard turn to evade Houthi fire, which contributed to the jet falling overboard. Another Navy official elsewhere called it an evasive maneuver against an incoming Houthi weapon. The Institute for the Study of War said that the Houthis use a complex strike package combining ballistic and cruise missiles and drones to force the Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier to take evasive action. And the pilot was injured when he jumped out of the plane as it was going overboard and landed on the flight deck. This F-18 Super Hornet, $70 million, $67 million aircraft is now at the bottom of the Red Sea, and it will likely remain at the bottom of the Red Sea, because what is unlikely is a recovery operation in an active combat zone where these two aircraft carriers, their 10 warships that are designed to protect them, and the 160 odd fighter jets and helicopters that are on the two aircraft carriers seem to be unable to protect these aircraft carriers that are moving and taking evasive action. You're not going to have a recovery crew in a static position trying to pull up this jet. I don't foresee that happening when they're unable to defend. They're unable to defend with all of that sophisticated war, hundreds of billions of dollars of war investment. They're not that are moving all the time. You're not going to do that when they're frozen. If we look at the next slide, you can see the satellite imagery from Monday that caught at least what appears to be a hard turn. It's not clear that this is the hard turn that dropped the fighter jet. But it does show here 900 kilometers from Yemen, the Carrier Strike Group 3 with its Carrier Strike Group with 3 guided missile destroyers and 1 cruiser that accompany it. If we look at the next slide, you can see that these aircraft carriers are surprisingly maneuverable. You can see the list angle that this takes during this kind of evasive action. And the CNN report rightly pointed out that the U.S. Navy carriers are surprisingly maneuverable for their size, powered by 2 nuclear reactors driving 4 propeller shafts. These Nimitz-class carriers, like the Truman, can reach speeds of 30 knots or 35 miles per hour for land speed. And so what obviously happened is the missiles and drone package that was sent, the strike package that was sent by Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces, got through the guided missile destroyers to the point where the actual aircraft carrier had to take evasive action. And we've been saying on this program for many months that an attack hitting one of these aircraft is only a matter of time. This is the most concentrated naval warfare, the Navy says, since World War II. It's a 24/7 operation, as CENTCOM says. And so we're seeing a remarkable detail here. The Yemeni armed forces on Monday said, linked this attack on the Truman that was obviously a near miss and ended up in the second kill of an aircraft, because we remember back in late December during an Ansar Allah Yemeni armed forces drone and missile attack on the Truman, that the USS Gettysburg, the cruiser, shot down one of the F-18s that was on board the Harry Truman. So they've now lost 2 F-18s during this combat with the Yemeni armed forces. The Yemeni armed forces statement on Monday linked this attack on the Truman to two massacres that were civilian massacres that were carried out by the Americans. It says, during the past hours, the American enemy committed two massacres, the first in Sana'a and the second targeting a shelter for immigrants from several African countries in the Sada government in north of Yemen. They killed more than 70 people, at least in that attack. The two massacres, the Yemeni armed forces say, resulted in hundreds of killed and wounded. In response to this aggression, the massacres against civilians, the armed forces targeted the U.S. aircraft carrier Truman and its warships, engaging them in a joint operation carried out by the Naval Force, Air Force, and Missile Force using a number of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and drones in the past hour that lasted over hours. The result of the clash and confrontation was that the carrier was forced to retreat and move away from its previous position and head far north in the Red Sea. The Yemeni armed forces will continue to target and pursue the aircraft carrier and all enemy warships in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea until the aggression against Yemen stops. And if we look at this next slide, you can see how the fighter jets are all on the deck. These are the jets that are bombing Yemen, carrying out these civilian massacres. Are these jets on the deck? This is the Harry S. Truman, what it actually looks like. The next slide, you can see what the flight deck is, because at any given point, half of the 80 fighter jets and helicopters are in the hangar bay underneath the flight deck, and you can see them. They just sit right there on the edge. You can see it in the next slide as well, number 27, the flight deck. So it suggests that the Yemenis were able to get munitions so close to hitting the aircraft carrier that they took evasive action to such a degree that they threw off one of these planes when the ship is built to obviously not do that, which indicates a significant operation and presumably a near miss. Abdel Malik you can see in the next one actually is the Truman Carrier Strike Group and its three, number 28, it's three guided missile destroyers and one cruiser, the USS Gettysburg. Do we have 28 up? Yes, here we have them. So you can see each of them. You can see the Harry S. Truman in the upper left there making the hard turn. That might be the turn that's taking them away from Yemen rather than the actual satellite footage of the because one of the naval commanders said that the evasive maneuver is a zigzag. It's not a big loop like we're seeing there, but that's a hard turn. We haven't seen that in weeks of satellite imagery that we've got. This is from the Sentinel-2 satellite. And Abdul Malik al-Houthi said that the American ships now stay more than 1,000 kilometers off the coast of Yemen. And there has been 36 operations against the USS Truman with 130 anti-ship cruise missiles and anti-ship ballistic missiles and drones, and presumably it sounded like in the attack on the Truman also using unmanned surface vehicles, which are drone boats, which might have been what got through, just speculating, but might have been what got through was the drone boat. Because there's a lot of we know that they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars they're spending it every week on missiles defending these carriers and the destroyers. So this is the satellite footage of the USS Carl Vinson. This is the second aircraft carrier, also has 80 fighter jets on it. It has F-35s on its deck. And on yesterday, the Yemeni Armed Forces said that the drone force from the Yemeni Armed Forces executed a military operation that targeted the American aircraft carrier Vinson and a number of her accompanying warships in the Arabian Sea with several drones. This operation comes 24 hours after the Blessed operation that forced the American aircraft carrier Truman to withdraw to the far north of the Red Sea. Also, the Yemeni Armed Forces on Wednesday announced that their announced their third drone operation versus Israel, targeting Tel Aviv with 3 Yafa drones, and a 4th Yafa drone targeted a vital target in occupied Ashkelon. The Yemeni armed forces, they say, affirm to our great people that we will continue to support the Palestinian people until the aggression against Gaza is halted and the siege is lifted. That is their consistent position since October 2023. So that is the resistance report for Yemen and the resistance report for day 573 of this war.
Thank you, as always, John. Meticulous analysis and breaking down. Just I mean these fighter jets. You said there were 80. There's usually 80 on any given. Wow, that's
they're not all fighter jets. There's 9 squadrons, which would be, pretty close to 80. There's a few helicopters, and there's a couple of Hawkeyes, which are surveillance aircraft. But fighter jets, and they're all stacked. To park them is a feat. And so I think that we're seeing. I mean, they tried to cover it up. They straight up tried to cover up what happened and tried to make it seem like an accident. In many ways, I think it's a more significant military operation than if you were to actually shoot down the fighter jet, because it gives the indication that you had a near miss on a multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier, and you hit one of those carriers, you're talking about 180 fighter jets being lost. So it's very significant. And the naval commanders have been saying that it's only a matter of time before one of these ships are going to get hit.
And those ships are symbols of American power more than anything else. And I think what Yemen is showing is that they're obsolete in a way, because they can't even, they have to hide them all the time and keep them far away from Yemen. So,
and they're less effective when they're far away, and there's more logistics when they're far away. And that's one of the reasons why they had to call in half of the active B-2 bomber force and station them at Diego Garcia to get long range bombers, because they're too afraid right now to go onshore and drop bombs in Yemen. They're firing standoff weapons from a distance because they're worried about the air defense systems that the Yemenis have. So it's quite a battle for the Yemenis. It seems like, a lot of talk is about how it's just sort of a solidarity action with Gaza, but this is a very consequential military engagement that you can hear from both sides explaining it that way. The Americans are certainly not underselling how challenging this theater is, and that's why they're not. I don't think they're going to go get that fighter jet off the bottom of the Red Sea, because they can't be stationary. They have to be constantly in motion 24/7, as CENTCOM said. They're under attack.
Incredible. Thank you so much, John. And of course, the ways in which, you were describing about Gaza. 70% of Gaza is now under, so-called no-go zones or direct kill zones, pushing people further and further south, and in more concentrated areas, and then of course bombing those areas.
In your news reports, you're covering different areas than I'm covering, and that if the war was against the resistance, we would be talking about casualties in the same locations, but we never are. The beginning newscast that you do is always different places than I'm covering, which just shows you that it's a war on civilians, because the resistance is willing to fight in the areas where there is no civilians, but the Israelis aren't up for that fight right now.
Clip of the Israeli army officer who went on CNN back in 2023 towards the start of the genocide. I forget his name, but he just said it openly in English that the war is not against Hamas, it's against all of the civilians. And, the Palestinian fighters just happen to be in the way sometimes. He didn't say that last part, but I'm adding that last part.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
it's
how you have
obvious.
50 plus thousand people killed.
And of course, that's a vast undercount, according to
it's a devastating crime that we're watching. Looking in the corner of the screen and seeing day 573.
Yeah, it is. And there's something else I was gonna say. I can't remember, but we have a couple of discussion issues. And they both kind of relate to our earlier segment about U.S. campuses. One of the students who was arrested, a Columbia student, not Mahmoud Khalil, but Mohsen Mahdawi, was also arrested, but yesterday he was released from ICE detention. Ali, why don't you walk us through what happened and why it's significant?
Yeah, well, let's take a look at the clip first of him being released at the courthouse, the federal courthouse. This is in Vermont.
He's free!
So that is Mohsen Mahdawi in footage posted online by Christopher Hilali, who has been campaigning for his release. And Mohsen Mahdawi, as we reported previously, is a lawful permanent resident of the United States. He's lived in Vermont for more than 10 years, and he's set to graduate from Columbia University in May. People will remember that ICE, immigrations and customs enforcement agents arrested him, apparently in direct retaliation for his advocacy for Palestine on April 14th. And this was just after he came out of his citizenship interview at the one of the ICE or the US citizenship and services offices in Vermont. According to the ACLU, that's the American Civil Liberties Union, on April 30th, quote, from the bench, Judge George W. Crawford ordered the release of Mohsen Mahdawi from prison on bail today, pending the resolution of his habeas corpus petition. The government requested that Judge Crawford pause his release from prison for 7 days by issuing a stay of the order, which the judge denied, which is another sign that the federal judges are standing up to the government on this. There were some other rulings across the country in the last week or two against these so-called immigration enforcement actions by the Trump administration. And it's significant there that this judge ordered Mohsen Mahdawi released. Sheza Abushi Dalal, a staff attorney with CLEAR, which is one of the legal advocacy organizations that has been defending Mahdawi and other individuals targeted in the Trump administration crackdown, said, quote, the court's order to free Mohsen today is a victory for Mohsen in his just pursuit of continued advocacy for Palestinian rights, and it is a victory for all people in this country invested in their ability to dissent and speak and protest for causes they're morally drawn to. And so it's an ongoing battle, but there are victories, and hopefully this the judgments that keep stacking up against the government will hopefully make it more and more costly for the government to continue this completely unconstitutional, outrageous crackdown on behalf of Israel, which is what the United States government is doing. So we're happy to see Mohsen Mahdawi released. We want to see Ruwaida 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and Mahmoud Khalil and anyone else who is in this unjust, outrageous detention released immediately as well.
Yeah, and we will continue to be updating on the cases of course, Ruwaida and Mahmoud. But there are some other developments at Harvard University. this is after the president of the university announced new measures that his administration would be taking to combat so-called anti-Semitism, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian bias on campus. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on at Harvard and kind of, how this could be setting a precedent for the next stage of this kind of repression?
Well, as people who've been following the story will know, Harvard University is the richest and oldest university in the United States, perhaps the most prestigious. And they have actually filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration for its attempts to basically blackmail the university to accede to political demands and to cede control over the university effectively to the government, and particularly to the fanatical pro-Israel people in the government who've been put in charge of combating so-called anti-Semitism. And Harvard made headlines by refusing to surrender in exactly the same way that Columbia University did, and so Harvard, taking that decision to stand up, has rallied other universities to say, look, we're not just going to bow down. But to cast Harvard as sort of a hero in this is not the whole story, because Harvard has, of course, been pandering to the Israel lobby and to its pro-Israel donors, and indeed to the government in many ways for a long time. But one of the things they did in order to show how seriously they take all this is the president of Harvard assigned two task forces, sort of parallel task forces, one on combating anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias, and the other on combating anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian bias. And these two task forces, their reports were issued this week. And I took a look at them. And then after they were issued, the president announced these various measures to deal with these various kinds of bias. But what's interesting, so they're two parallel reports, quite lengthy. And I did sort of a thread of tweets on Twitter or X yesterday with some of my findings from reviewing those reports. And I'll sort of start at the end where I kind of give my overall impression, which is that these are two very different reports. The first one, the one on anti-Semitism, is really a rehash of all the types of talking points and spin and distortions that we typically hear from Israel lobby groups and pro-Israel politicians, exactly the kind of things that Kei Pritsker was talking about in the context of our discussion with the encampments, where there are really the incidents of so-called anti-Semitism amount to students not being, not wanting to hear the truth about what Israel is doing in Gaza. Like, they feel uncomfortable, they feel hurt, they feel unwelcome because someone talked about the very real atrocities that are happening in Gaza. And the report, I'll just go through this in sort of the order I did it on Twitter, although it may not necessarily be the best order. But looking at the anti-Semitism report first, they actually all these students feel uncomfortable hearing about Palestinians or hearing criticism of Israel. So how can we make them feel more comfortable? So this task force says, there are some good things that are going on at Harvard, and we should build on those. And one of those is having veterans of the Israeli and American militaries and those who had lived through Middle Eastern conflicts as civilians taking part in exchanges in classrooms. So having
finger on the pulse there.
Right. Yeah, so
absolutely.
like bringing
Incredible.
Israeli soldiers perhaps fresh out of the Netzarim corridor, or the Marag corridor, or maybe having just dropped bombs on Gaza, come to Harvard and talk about what's that like with perhaps relatives of some of the survivors of these massacres. And this is supposed to be a good educational activity. And then if we go to the next bit, Tamara, it's really quite striking how the anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias report portrays students campaigning against Israeli occupation, apartheid, torture, murder, and other crimes as aggressive. It's like it constantly stresses how they're aggressive, how they're disruptive. It uses those words. And it even gives a history where it says that following the collapse of the path of peace in the late 2010s, pro-Palestinian organizing on campus took a more aggressive tenor, where it really is very gentle in describing the things that students are protesting about, as if all this is happening in a vacuum. And then, and the next one you can see where they talk about pro-Palestinian student organizers have become increasingly disruptive in recent years. So that language is throughout. And then, pardon my French, because in the next part I use the word BS in full. We try to keep this a family show. But the examples of some of the discrimination, I mean, it was notable to me that there are very few reports of any sort of real acts of discrimination. I mean, if there are any, then of course there should be accountability and justice for those. But mostly it's stuff like this, that a student was offended at hearing the word genocide in a video that was assigned in a classroom, an Israeli student, and he says, quote, "As an Israeli student, when I hear these as the first words of a course, I know that I'm no longer welcome in this course." So he doesn't allege that anyone did anything to him personally, just that he had to watch a video in which the word genocide was used in relation to the genocide in Gaza, that made him feel unwelcome.
That's such a confession, though, isn't it? Like they know they're carrying out a genocide.
Yeah, there's so much of that. And then there's another thing where a student was upset because Israeli Jewish settlements surrounding the Gaza Strip were called settlements. These are the communities, the kibbutzes in the so-called Gaza envelope that we've talked about. We had the preeminent historian Ilan Pape on this program, for example, to talk about how these were military settlements, many of them established on the ruins of ethnically cleansed Palestinian villages, with the explicit goal of surrounding Gaza and keeping the Palestinians from returning to their land. So someone was offended at these being called settlements. That's another example of the so-called discrimination. And then the next one, there's a whole section on the medical school where recently a course on Palestinian health was censored and cancelled by the university. And this report says how there's all this bias. And I mean, we've talked so many times, and Nora, you've done this incredible series of interviews, ongoing series of interviews for the Electronic Intifada podcast with healthcare workers in Gaza who've been to Gaza. Anyone viewing this show knows the total destruction that the healthcare system, Israel's deliberately inflicted on the healthcare system. And so naturally, people in the School of Public Health are going to want to focus on that and talk about that. You know, I mean, the horrors we've seen in the past 18 months, the babies who are left to die in incubators, the fact that no medicine has been allowed into Gaza at all for the past 2 months, all of this. Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya is still somewhere in an Israeli torture camp. The medics murdered and tortured. The ambulance crew, the 15 people who were murdered recently. We heard about Hind Rajab later, the 2 paramedics who went to rescue her, who were murdered along with her by Israel. Hind Rajab, the little girl we heard about earlier in the program. And it goes on and on and on. And there are students claiming that the teaching of the courses are biased because, quote, there were no programs on the public health consequences of rockets being fired at Israel or suicide bombings. I mean, when was the last suicide bombing? We're talking about, what was it, 2008, I think, something like that was the very latest, if not earlier. So this is just trolling. It's nonsense. There's nothing there. Absolutely nothing there.
I mean, but it points to this real, the institutionalization of, a perceived victimhood of an occupying, genociding, settler, colonial force. And that it's taken at face value, that there is no investigation, no critical thought applied to this completely made up perception, self-perception. I mean, it's a skewed reality that that the supporters of the settler colonial project of Zionism and Israel are trying to make real, but it's completely false.
And so, speaking of settler colonialism, another example of anti-Israel or anti-Semitic bias or one-sidedness or whatever it was is that that in a class on settler colonialism, that's the topic. They show that the course material contained this map showing the English colonies in North America, which of course brought disease and displacement and genocide to indigenous people in what is now North America, next to the maps of the early settlements of European Zionist colonizers, which is what they called themselves. I mean,
they were
Zionists
proud of
were not shy about that.
Yeah.
They called themselves, they said, we're going to colonize Palestine. And now, Zionists on campuses cry, oh my God, you called it colonialism.
It's something colonial, Theodore Herzl.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so they were offended at this. There's no suggestion that these maps are in any way inaccurate, but just the fact that the truth is being told is called bias or one-sided. Well, I'm sorry. If you're a Zionist, the reality, the truth about Palestine is one-sided. The Zionists came, displaced and expelled the Palestinians. There's no two sides to that. There's no two sides to slavery.
It's not a matter of opinion.
Yeah. There's no two sides to the destruction of indigenous populations in North America. The indigenous people of North America didn't go to England and colonize England and displace English people from their homes. So that's why this can't be a two-sided thing. It only went one way. Palestinians in the late 1800s didn't get on ships and travel from Palestine to Ukraine and Poland and Britain. They didn't go to Lord Balfour's Scottish estate and build colonies on it. So that's why the colonization of Palestine is not two-sided. It's one-sided. It was only Lord Balfour who gave away the homeland of the Palestinians. There was no Palestinian declaration that Lord Balfour's Scottish estate belongs to someone else now. So
well, maybe the Palestinians should declare that now.
I visited his former estate in Scotland
plant a flag
in 2010, and I declared it now the property of the Palestinian people.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I did. So I mean that's just that, and there's so much of this, and so a lot of the reporters, we need to make sure that teaching is objective and that all views are represented. And what they mean by that is that the truth cannot be taught without a bunch of lies also told to quote unquote balance it out. And then I want to go down to and let's now go forward to the part where I say, among the recommendations, this is my view, that they want to encourage normalization between organizers. Instead of protests and standing up against genocide, they want to reward Palestinians and Muslim students and Arab students who work with and do these fake dialogues with pro-Israel Zionist groups. And so they suggest what I call bribery here, It's like the good, in their view, the good students who go along with these normalization efforts and agree to do joint events with Zionist groups. We're talking about pro-Israel, pro-genocide groups, that they should get extra opportunities like, awards, fellowships, and things like that. So play nice and you'll be rewarded. So I think that's probably enough about the anti-Semitism report. I do want to talk for a couple of minutes about the separate report, which I mentioned, that was published by the Presidential Task Force on Anti-Semitism, Anti-Arab and Anti-Palestinian Bias. And this is a very different report. This was actually quite an impressive report, and unprecedented in my knowledge in terms of documenting the real, actual, and horrific abuse, neglect, and violence that Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students face at Harvard. And I think that we see mirrored on many other campuses. And the authors of this report talk about the amount of fear that many students and faculty at Harvard expressed in even talking to the authors of this report. That's how much fear and intimidation there is on campus about this stuff. And so they say in the report, quote, even the composition of the task force itself was a difficult and concerning task, as several Harvard faculty and students we believe would have contributed tremendously, chose not to serve because they did not feel they would be safe from personal attacks, doxing, and other threats. There's so much in this. It goes on and on. As we sought to listen and engage community members, reported experiencing regular and disturbing instances of bias and intimidation at Harvard, while some also told us they were dealing with the loss of family and friends due to the conflict in the region. Many reported struggling to navigate the trauma they were experiencing in their personal and professional lives within an environment and institution they felt was either unsympathetic at best or performative regarding their concerns. And also people detail a lot of hostility from the administration. And we even have a faculty member who says, and again, there's so much of this, these pages, these reports are dozens or hundreds of pages long, so I'm really only kind of giving you a taste of it. But one faculty member said, quote, this year tilted into a morally upside-down world in which people who object to mass slaughter are treated with suspicion, intimidation, and threats of actual punishment. And that really, I think, captures so much of what we've seen. And then again and again throughout this report, there are examples of the extreme intimidation that students, Palestinian and Palestine supporting students face, including these so-called doxing trucks, where Zionist groups hired these trucks with electronic billboards on them to drive around the campus area with the names and faces and even phone numbers of students, Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students, in order to say these students are terrorists, they support extremism, to expose them to danger. And while this was done by off-campus groups, what the report indicates is that the university really did nothing about it.
Same here in Berkeley. There were doxing trucks all around the University of California.
There was even a doxing plane.
That's right.
The Zionist group was flying an aeroplane over the Harvard campus with pulling a big Palestinian flag behind it and a big banner that says Harvard hates Jews. And then I'll sort of just run through this very quickly.
So unimaginative, along with everything else.
This was very significant. I don't know if we can even zoom in on these. They had this really detailed survey in the report on anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian bias. It wasn't just all this impressionistic stuff that someone felt uncomfortable, but they had this survey which showed, I mean, there's a lot of statistics, but just I'll sum up the headline here, that interviewed different groups, students who identified as Jewish, Muslim, Christian, other, and about do they feel safe on campus? Do they feel they belong? Do they feel mentally safe on campus? Do they feel well supported? And by vast margins of all the groups, it is the Muslim students who felt extremely unsafe on campus, extremely unwelcome on campus, and extremely unsupported. And they asked similar questions by ethnicity as well. And there you found that students of Middle Eastern or North African origin felt extremely unsafe and unwelcome from their physical safety. And Jewish students, thank goodness, felt largely very safe on campus. And it's not surprising that the survey found this, because I looked very well, tried to look very carefully through the anti-Semitism report, and thank goodness I could not find a single report of a violent anti-Semitic incident or a violent incident targeting Jewish students. That report even acknowledges that the encampment that took place on the Harvard campus was extremely peaceful. There was no violence involved whatsoever. So thank goodness, no violence against Jewish students on the Harvard campus. But compare that with what's in the report on anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian violent bias. And some highlights here, again, these are detailed in the report, that here we have it, the doxing attacks, external organizations operated trucks displaying personal information leading to widespread harassment. Websites published pictures and names of students, labeling them as anti-Semites. This doxing created a climate of intimidation that was compounded by the perception that the administration's response was inadequate, exacerbating community fears. And then physical harassment and safety concerns. Incidents of physical harassment, including a knife attack on a Muslim woman wearing a hijab, were reported in a listening session. Alcohol poured over a Palestinian student, and community members being followed and yelled at on the streets, heightened concerns over Islamophobic violence on campus. And then the report details in testimony after testimony after testimony how the university just shrugged, or if anything, took positions hostile to the victims of these kinds of attacks. So it's just extraordinary, again, and reflects this contrast between the fiction in the mainstream media of Jewish students being so scared on campuses and under attack. And it's the complete opposite. Thank goodness Jewish students feel largely safe. And of course, I think everyone will agree that if any student is targeted because of who they are, their religion, their ethnicity, whatever, they deserve the same protection as everyone else. That includes Jewish students, of course. But the reality is this is not happening at Harvard. Sitting in a classroom and hearing the truth about Zionist colonization of Palestine is not harassment, is not discrimination. Your feelings don't matter next to a genocide. The fact that you don't like hearing that Israel commits genocide is your problem.
That's right.
That's something that's on you. It's not the rest of the world has to be shut down and censored, and Mahmoud Khalil has to be put in prison, and the Harvard Palestine Solidarity Committee has to be suspended, as Harvard actually did, because you don't like hearing about this. Right. On the other hand, universities have to step up and protect students. Whether Harvard is serious about this, we'll see. But what I fear is going to happen is that they're going to use this report as a pretext for more censorship and more control over what is taught and what is said. And that's ultimately going to be in Israel's favor.
Yeah. If your feelings are hurt by hearing the reality of the genocide that Israel is carrying out, then maybe you deserve to have your feelings hurt, because that is the reality.
Well, especially since we're told all the time by the right wing and by the sort of the ultra-conservative and right-wing people in the US who tell us all the time that there needs
Facts
to be
don't care about your feelings.
free speech on campuses. Yeah, they say facts don't care about your feelings, and they say that you should go to university and be confronted with ideas that make you uncomfortable. What they mean by that is that they want people to go on campuses and defend slavery, for example, or to defend views that women are not as intelligent as men. They want right-wing people to be able to say that on campuses without opprobrium. That's what they mean by there needs to be free speech. That's the type of idea they want to promote. But the one thing that none of them can tolerate is free speech about Israel, of facts that make Zionists feel uncomfortable. Then they will shut everything down.
Yeah, they will. Well, thanks for that deep dive, Ali, and I know you'll be following up what Harvard intends to do with the research that it has collected. It's a story for another day. We'll see what happens.
So far, I mean, I'll just say this, and I think we'll hear a lot of this. It's a lot of, we hear everyone, and everyone is in pain, and we have to look after everyone. But I'm sorry, if you're a supporter of genocide and your pain is that you don't like hearing about the crimes Israel is committing, you are not the same as the relatives and friends of people who've been murdered in this Holocaust in Gaza. So even that equation that Harvard is already doing reflects a built-in pro-Israel bias. There really is only one group of victims here, and it's not the pro-Israel students who want to be able to advocate for genocide without feeling any opprobrium for that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like the Harvard anti-Semitism report should have been added as an example to the Harvard anti-Palestinian report.
Exactly. It came out on the same day. But they're two completely different reports. I mean, it's very interesting how they reflect different realities.
Well, thanks again. Let's take a look at the website. There's an incredible, I remembered what I had forgotten earlier in the discussion to talk about, which David Sheen's impressive long form report on this very curious family at the center of a lot of the architecture of the genocide in Gaza. Including not just the systematic way that they have planned the bombings and destruction of everything in Gaza, but also the architecture of creating the lies that have led to manufacture consent for this genocide. Ali, you worked heavily on editing David's article. Give us a sense of what's in it and why it's important.
I won't say too much because we're hoping to get David on maybe even next week to talk about this more. But if people really want to do their homework, they can read this article. It's a long one, but it's very good, and it's there for the record that we want to make sure none of this disappears down the memory hole. But basically, the man you see there on the screen, that's Colonel Golan Vach, and he invented the October 8th lie that they found 8 burned babies in this house in Kibbutz Be'eri, and that never happened. There were no 8 burned babies. He invented a lot of other lies, including specific lies about beheaded babies, about
piles
Israelis
of
being tied together and burned en masse, and things that absolutely there's no evidence that they happened. But after telling these lies that in a way queued up the genocide, he and his brother, who's a brigadier general, Yehuda Vach, and they also have a younger brother who's in the army called Elishav, actually participated in many horrific war crimes in Gaza, particularly in the Netzarim corridor. And so that's why it's called the Vach brothers, Israel's first family of genocide. But there's a lot in here, and so we'll hopefully get David on to talk about it very soon.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. So please check that out. We also have some really important news reports by David Cronin, Michael F. Brown. Yeah,
I was going to say
Michael
Michael Brown is covering how Itamar Ben-Gvir, the ultra-Kahanist, racist minister of national security in Israel, got a very warm reception at Mar-a-Lago, the president's home in Florida, and he's been in the U.S. receiving a warm welcome. He even went to Congress, so that's where we are now, and we're grateful to Michael for covering that.
Michael's the one who watches all of these, mainstream corporate media reports, and it's a sacrifice that we all honor him for. So thank you, Michael. David Cronin also has some reports, and of course, our features by our writers in Gaza, and people like Ruwaida, who we had on earlier in the program. Her feature, "These Are the Most Terrifying Days Yet," is just spectacular and moving and difficult to read, because of course it is, but absolutely necessary. So please go check that out. We have another podcast episode that I did with a midwife here in the Bay Area, in California, who was in Gaza about a year ago, helping to deliver babies at one of the maternity hospitals in Rafah, which is completely decimated, and of course one of the 36 hospitals in Gaza that is either completely or partially non-functional. And she's an extraordinary midwife, certified nurse midwife, and nurse practitioner here at one of the main teaching hospitals here in the Bay Area, UCSF. And she came to work with a watermelon pin on her badge, and immediately was targeted for suspension. And then now there's the administration has filed a letter of intent to fire her because of her watermelon pin. Again, catering to the feelings of Zionists who feel victimized by a piece of fruit that is on her badge. And the UCSF administration is more than happy to cater to the feelings of people who support genocide than to their own members of faculty and physicians. It's just absolutely despicable, but a really, really incredible interview that I did with her. So check that out as well. So much more on the Electronic Intifada website, electronicintifada.net. If you can, as always, help support this program and our writers in Gaza, go to the Donate Now link up at the top there, and only donate if you can. Get updates by signing on to our mailing list. We will only email you once a day, and also to notify you about these kinds of live streams. And of course, go to YouTube, subscribe, like, do all the things. Ali, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to apologize to some of our readers, because in the past week or so, we had a little glitch where some people were not getting some of our emails. We have fixed that, and I'm sorry that happened, but things happen, but it's fixed now. So if you're not on our email list, as Nora said, go to the website, click that Get Updates button, and join the cool crowd.
Yes. And on behalf of everyone at the Electronic Intifada, Tamara Nassar, our director and producer, thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Ellie Gerzon, our social media consultant. Thank you, Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, Michael F. Brown, for fact-checking. Everybody at the Electronic Intifada, thank you. And on behalf of myself and John, Asa, Ali, and Tamara, thank you all for watching and listening, and we will see you next week.